Hafaday, and welcome to this series about ancient sites and traditions of Micronesia. These episodes introduce the latest research and discussions about ancient life, history, and cultural traditions all across our diverse region of Micronesia. I hope that you like this series, and I look forward to learning more together. The stonework complex of Nan Madol in Pohnpei has been among the most famous sites in Micronesia, documented through numerous studies of history, archaeology, and other fields. Here is a summary update about the archaeology of Nan Madol presented by Mark McCoy.
Hello, Kasalelia. Welcome to my talk entitled What Have We Learned About Nan Madol? A Review of Recent Research. My name is Mark McCoy, and what I'm going to try to do very briefly is to give you kind of an overview of about the last 15 years of academic publications and research about the site of Nan Madol. And I want to start with just a brief introduction to myself and my interests in the topics. I am a Pacific Island archaeologist. I did my PhD at the University of California at Berkeley, and then have gone on and taught archaeology at places like San Jose State University and the University of Otago and Southern Methodist University. Today, I'm a professor at Florida State University, and while a lot of my research is in the islands of Polynesia, I've been very fortunate to spend time at some incredible archaeological sites in Micronesia. That began way back in 1999 in Palau, where I was an archaeologist employed in a larger project, but folks who know the area know the time period, the construction of the compact road around Bobbled. And that was fantastic. I got to revisit Palau last summer. I directed what the DPAA calls a terrestrial recovery. That means I was looking for a marine aviator who crashed in World War II. So it was great to revisit that. But my other experience in Micronesia is on the island of Pohnpei at Nan Madol. And it's been as an academic archaeologist that I've been done that sort of work. And I'm going to review that and some other works of other folks and colleagues in this talk. Now, archaeology, of course, is about tangible heritages and the physical things that are left over from the past. And Nan Madol has much more going on for it than just its physical and its built heritage. So I think it's actually worth taking just a moment, and I'll do this only very briefly, is to think about, not just what archaeology can be done at Nan Madol, but how the importance of Nan Madol for archaeology. And I can think of at least a few different reasons why it is such an important place for archaeology, right? So number one, because of that wonderful intangible heritage, stories, oral histories, it's very easy for us to, or it's not as easy for us to kind of dehumanize the past. By that I mean, archaeologists sometimes tell stories about the past where it's hard to believe we're talking about people. And that's a hard thing to do at Nan Madol because we know a lot about the people and the history and so forth. And so I think that makes it's not unique, but very important for retelling our human past through archaeology. It's also important because it is a place that unfortunately has been seen attraction of what's sometimes called pseudoscience, right? So that's kind of people using the trappings of science to make claims about the past. So if any of you saw this terrible series on Netflix called Ancient Apocalypse, Nan Madol features in it in some very disingenuous, this sort of analysis is a strong word, of the past. And, archaeology is important for archaeologists to be able to push back against those sorts of nonsense. And Nan Madol is one piece of that. The last thing I'd point out is archaeology is, of course, a discipline that has comes out of colonialism, right? It is very much this thing that was invented to put Europeans and their history above everyone else's. But it doesn't have to stay that way. I think I'm not alone in saying that archaeology can be and should be for everyone. And I can't imagine a version of archaeology where we could talk about a place like Stonehenge, where we're not in the same breath talking about a place like Nan Madol. So it is a very important, and I think, two-way street, the importance of both doing good archaeology at Nan Madol, but also the importance of Nan Madol to doing a good archaeology kind of version of what the human past is like. So I'm going to review just some really recent research from really recent, at least kind of these. I think about it in these sort of 5-year chunks. Although you could cut this up many different ways. It is very centric around my experience in Pohnpei. So I started going to Pohnpei in 2010. So I'll talk about some research that I did then and some other colleagues. Of course, Nan Madol became a World Heritage Site after 2015, and talk a little bit about that, and then a bit about some more recent research I've been involved with, which if you haven't seen it, I promise by the end of this talk, you will know something that you didn't know about Nan Madol. If you're not keeping up on the latest of very dry papers that academics write, here's your chance to catch up very quickly and hopefully a little bit more entertainingly than the way we write. Now, even though I'm going to focus on this relatively recent past, I want to acknowledge some folks who are really foundational to being able to do any kind of archaeology at Nan Madol. And those are the folks here. Of course, Dr. Mauricio and Dr. Beardsley sadly passed away recently in the last few years. Dr. Athens, Dr. Ayers have retired, but are important to this time period that I'm going to talk about, even if I'm not going to necessarily feature them per se. Foundational figures. There's a whole other kind of cast of characters that I'll sort of refer to in my talk. Some I work with directly, like Helen Alderson, who was my master's student. I'll talk about her research, or Adam Thompson, who used to work for Federated States of Micronesia and Heritage, Takuya Nagota, who of course is still doing active research on the island. Again, I won't speak for what their results are; they can speak for themselves. But I do want to acknowledge that it's not just, even though I'm going to talk mostly about my research. When I say recent research, there's been a lot of other work. There's been 2 PhDs written about Pohnpei. So the students supervised by Bill Ayers, Catherine Cycle, and Maurice Levine, and of course there are other Christoph Sand, who's done archaeology in the Pacific for very many years, has written about Nan Madol in the last few years, and even since Nan Madol became World Heritage status, it's attracted some folks from outside of Pacific Island archaeology, like Doug Comer. So my first trip out to Nan Madol, I'd heard about it. I'd talked to folks about it, and I can remember talking to Bill Ayers at a conference and saying, "Those are amazing, those columnar basalts." This is before I'd even got out there. I said, "Where are people getting them from?" He said, "Oh, they're all over the island. There's kind of natural sources all over," and that is certainly true. So on my first trip out there was really a trip to go and visit Nan Madol because it's fantastic and spectacular, but also to go and collect geological samples with the idea of figuring out, is there something about the geochemistry of the stones used, those columnar basalt stones, that could maybe tell us narrow down where on the island some of them are coming from. And we got good results for that. So then on a return visit, I brought a team, including, very importantly, Helen Alderson, who was my master's student at the time. She got deeply into both the science, but also the oral history of the place, and eventually after this, went on to Cambridge to do a PhD about material culture and koshrai. So this was again, her introduction to Micronesia, and a very exciting project for both of us. And what you see what she's doing there is she's using what's called a portable XRF. And what that is it's shooting X-rays non-destructively at the stone and to try to work out what the chemistry of it is. And I won't bore you with all the details of it, but one of the things that I'll point out here, because I expect if you're watching this, you're very interested in the details of Nan Madol, is if you dig into to Helen's master's thesis, she did a fantastic job of documenting exactly which stones we were looking at and where they are in the sequence of particular islets and pieces of architecture, right? Which header or stretcher, how it's oriented, lots of details are in there. We focused mostly on Nan Dowas, which if you've only visited Nan Madol once, that's the place you went. The tomb of the first Salvador is there. And we focused a lot on there. Look, we got a few hundred architectural stone that we could look at the chemistry of. There's much more work to do. One could go to a portable XRF to the site and spend a lifetime working out the details of some of those things. Now, one of the reasons why, not a lifetime, but it's certainly worth revisiting, is we were able to identify one particular source that's noted on this map as PM volcanic plug. I won't say it's Pohnpeian name. It's a sort of a wonderfully rude name for this particular volcanic plug. And if you know it, you know it. It belongs to the Awak, which is a region, but it's also a geological archaeological series. And so we can be specific about that particular source. And so when we narrow that out, and that's the red colored bars there, you can see, at least at Nan Dowas, it shows up most frequently early phases of construction, and that's where it's largest. So that tells us a little bit about kind of the scale at which people were possibly drawing in material at different time periods. Now, one of the things that the XRF machine is that we found was very common is it breaks down. And when it broke down, we decided to sort of, as the saying goes, take lemons and make lemonade. And one of those activities that we did was to go around, and this is really Helen and Adam Thompson, Helen Alderson and Adam Thompson and work, going around to all those islets and breakwaters and so forth, and getting a good GPS derived map of the site. And if you think that's a very cool sort of thing, you can download it. We made it completely available. It's got as much information as we had. This is Hambrook's numbering system that he used when he mapped the site 100 years beforehand. It's got the place names where we could put them on there, and all available at the Digital Archaeological Record. So that was a mapping exercise, something that we hope would encourage other folks to again share data and kind of map the site. Another mapping exercise that we did for about 4 days, we had this fellow, Richard Hemme, come out with a terrestrial laser scanner. Those dots on there are all the different places he set it up around Nan Dowas. So we have a extraordinarily detailed rendering of Nan Dowas. And if you've been to it, you understand this is a very complicated piece of architecture. And it was very useful, at least for me, to kind of visualize and understand the different phases of construction of Nan Dowas. And certainly it's been useful for me to get across to folks who've never been there exactly how amazing it is. And so what you see in the bottom parts of the slides are some screen captures of the tomb of the first Salvador. Now, I'm not the only one interested in sort of burial architecture as a way to understand the past. Certainly, what you're seeing here is some data from publications by Bill Ayers and Catherine Cycle, as well as a recent work by recently published work by Ross Cordy. On the I think left side that you can see of this chart, you'll see a chart that's got a lot of dark red bars and then one big high kind of bright red one. That's the volume, the estimated total volume of material for Nan Dowas, and showing you how unusually large it is. That's that scale is going from 1 to 10 to 100 to 1,000. A huge difference between that and all the other burials that we have good data on for volume. Again, archaeologists tell stories with material evidence, things we've measured. So that's an important thing to note. I'd also, on the right-hand side, you see I've just pulled Nan Dowas out of that distribution just to see there aren't a lot of big differences in terms of the overall sizes. Sort of gradual increase from smallest to largest once you take Nan Dowas out of it. In the middle there are the royal tombs of Leilu, and they are kind of in between those two things, which is an interesting thing. And again, until archaeologists kind of make these sorts of measurements, it's difficult to make comparisons based on material evidence. Now, on our best days, we're connecting the dots between immaterial sort of heritage and the material. And archaeoastronomy is a great way to do that. I've certainly found it very useful in trying to understand the architecture, ritual, religious architecture in the Hawaiian Islands. There has been an attempt at this. I get asked about this by folks every once in a while. Cesar Esteban is an astronomer, has gone out and made some estimates about where you should see different both sunrise and sunrise at different time periods, times of the year, I should say. And then in the past, where you should see major things like Pleiades rising on the horizon and Orion's belt. I think this is great. And one thing that I hope we see a lot more of and sort of grounded into a lot more detail than what Cesar Esteban was able to accomplish in this one particular study. While this is about the kind of results of research and so forth in the relatively recent past, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out there's a huge piece of work to in terms of the nomination report that went into getting Nan Madol on the World Heritage List. If you haven't seen it and you're interested in the site, this is a place you should start. It's encyclopedic. There's not a lot in there that that it's a great summary. It's a great place, jumping off part if you are just getting into the literature. Now, returning back to Nan Dowas, one of the things that we are interested in doing is try to get a better idea of when it was built. And so archaeologists working with other laboratory scientists have worked up a way to get a very precise measurements on the age at which corals die. Now, that doesn't work if we're talking about corals that died a long time ago and rolled around in the beach and you find them on the shore. These are ones that have been broken off fresh, which would have been a lot of the building material for Nan Madol, including the islets, but also within the walls themselves. So using two corals that were found, one in the wall around the central tomb and then one in the crypt itself, we were able to get dates plus or minus 6 or 7 years. That's extraordinarily precise. It's as good as you're going to get. If the only thing better than that is dendrochronology, which we really don't have access to in the Pacific, and that puts that particular feature being constructed between around 1180 and 1200, which is a great lines upgrade with what we think of the oral histories, helps us refine what we thought the broad estimates that we've done based on radiocarbon dating. And you'll see more results like these thanks to Felicia Beardsley, who collected many more samples, and we're working on getting those results out and published so you can see more of the details of Nan Madol in future publications. And if you're thinking, there's not a lot of digging in here, where's the digging? Don't archaeologists dig? Yes, of course we do. Here's just an example, one example of looking at breadfruit pits, or what we think of breadfruit fermentation pits, from across an area sort of not far from Nan Madol, immediately next to Nan Madol. This is some great work using paleoethnobotany techniques that helps us narrow down some of the scale at which we're seeing breadfruit storage. We think we're seeing breadfruit storage. And some of the expectations if we were trying to scale up looking at this in a broader context. Also, the machine that you saw Richard Hemme standing next to, that LiDAR machine, when you strap that onto the bottom of a fixed-wing aircraft and fly it over Chenman Island and Nan Madol, this is what you get. And it's an incredible kind of digital elevation model that's built on a density of about 2 or 3 points per square meter across the entire landscape. That's great. And in terms of archaeological research, what it really gives us a look at that we didn't necessarily have before are a lot of those agricultural features on Chenman, like an incredible amount of earthworks for planting. And obviously we want to be able to put those pieces of the past together with others. Now, if you think this talk is relatively short on artifacts, and it is, I can assure you there's some interesting work around this particular artifact, which adds that was discovered in not as part of an archaeological excavation, but discovered just offshore on the reef in Pohnpei, and can be connected geochemically thanks to the work of Takuya Nagota and also Peter Shepard at the University of Auckland, connected back to Melanesia. And that's obviously an important piece for us to connect back. We not only have the oral traditions, language, genetics, and other sort of things to put Pacific peoples together in their time series and history, but lithic stone artifacts are a big piece of that. Now, why is it found all the way out into the reef? Good question, and one that we might be closer to having an answer to. This is, if you haven't seen it, that's a paper that I had out with colleagues in 2022. And for explanation here, these are folks on the paper, the lead author and many of those folks in there they're coastal scientists, right? They look at mangrove forests, sea level rise and fall across long periods of time. And after looking at the mangroves, especially the mangroves, but other lines of evidence, and how they have been growing, because they will grow up to sea level, right? So if you have if you drill through them and have good cores, you can figure out the sequence of how a coastline has been moving. While everyone in the Pacific has assumed that the islands of the Pacific have been rising in the period since people have started colonizing them, it turns out that is not the case for at least Pohnpei and Koshrai, and probably other parts of the Pacific have been sinking. And in fact, at about the time when Nan Madol, those dates that I described to you about when the first Salvador is buried, about that time, Nan Madol itself is about 1 meter under current sea level. is a meter above current sea level, and it has dropped a meter since then. That means those things that we call canals, those are probably streets. And it's very likely Nan Madol looks like it does today, and this goes for Leilu as well, probably because it's been sinking over time. That's a very big difference, right? Than certainly what I assumed about the site when I started working there, and what all of us assumed about it. While that's unlikely to change, that sort of sea level reconstruction, we still need to put together the kind of the dots of, okay, if the site has been sinking, what did that mean? Because people would have noticed this over the years as it's been built and so forth. So that is an exciting new piece of evidence, and one that has implications not just for the site of Nan Madol, but if you're someone who's interested in, Pacific voyaging and so forth, the sites, the early sites in this part of the world are typically sites that are coming from the southern hemisphere, the so-called Lapita peoples, right? So those are very important sites. And it turns out here in Micronesia, we also have very early sites. They're much further west than those folks who are the Lapita folks, but they're about the same time period. And what's interesting to us, at least from looking at the sea level reconstructions, is the places where we don't find very early sites are the same islands where we think the sea level, relative sea level, the islands have been sinking over that time. So it may be that adds comes from a site that was on the coast, more than many years before the earliest sites that we currently have well dated for Pohnpei. So that's an exciting result, and another thing that's come out of looking at Nan Madol. Thank you for listening to my talk, and good luck to everyone who's speaking at the conference. And I'm looking forward to listening to all of your talk. Thanks to Mike Carson for inviting me to participate, and to all the folks who care for the site and have helped out with the various research projects that I described here.
Thank you for joining us in learning about ancient sites and traditions of Micronesia. If you would like to learn more details, then I encourage you to visit, in person or online, the Micronesian Area Research Center of the University of Guam. Thank you again for watching this program. I hope that you will continue to explore and discover more.